Hey everyone, welcome back to Lights, Camera, and Action. I'm your host, always, Chris, and joining me is Miranda. Miranda, say hi to the peoples.
Hey everyone, glad to be back.
So, last week we talked, Miranda shared a lot of insight and a lot of talking about skincare. So, if you weren't there for that, make sure you go back and watch it. It's a really good episode. She did most of the teaching last time. I think this time I'll be, doing a lot more of the talking. Sorry about that, because I know y'all like to see, you know, Miranda's pretty face over mine. So even though it is a little pretty, it's not as pretty, I would say. Um, Today we're going to talk about negotiating payment as a model. We're going to talk a little bit about what is payment. We're going to talk about the importance of negotiating, not just as a model, but like the impacts it could have on the community in regards to like businesses and other models. We're going to talk about, negotiating now because it'll be harder later. We're going to give you some quick tips for negotiating payment. And then we're going to talk about how negotiation can really make boring projects seem worth it. But before I dive into this, I've got some really sad news for you all. We are going to be taking a break for a little while after this to be the last episode in this season. But not to worry, we will be picking up again in the spring with Miranda and I for some more awesome and amazing tips. So now that we've got the bad news out of the way, we can talk about what is payment. So, payment in modeling could be a lot of different things. For new people, it could be time for print. It could be for influencers, time for product. For everybody, it could be monetary, it could be money, right? Or it could just be time for experience. So when people think about like negotiating payment, they tend to usually just think about it as in regards to money, but payment can really be a lot of things, and it's anything that brings value to to your modeling, to your career, or to like what you're doing in your day-to-day life. But specifically in this podcast, payment is going to generally refer to money, as ultimately I think for most of us that's the form of payment we prefer is money, because it's the ultimate reward for our time and our experience. So we're going to dive in. I'm going to give you lots of tips and just a good pointers about negotiation. It's something that I think that a lot of like talent and models, unless they have a rep or somebody kind of in their corner to help them, they don't necessarily always think about or know how to go about approaching, right? But negotiating is really important, not just for you as a model, because it is very important for you as a model, right? Because it's your reward. You're negotiating why you're doing it, and if you feel rewarded, you're going to keep doing it, right? So the same concept also applies for other models. And for a long time, I've noticed this trend where models have done a lot of like time for print. And so, like a lot of photographers and a lot of businesses have really gotten used to this model of like time for print. But I find also, though, when models negotiate payment for themselves, right, they highlight their expertise, they highlight their skill set, they highlight their service just as a photographer would, just as a graphic designer would, just as a website designer would, right? They highlight like why they need to be paid. And I think it helps kind of build a mindset, not just for you, but other models. Hey, maybe I should also be negotiating payment, right? And it also helps get photographers, it helps get businesses, it helps get community members also in the mindset of like negotiating payment, right? Because people are ultimately going to do what you ask them to do or what you have them to do. And then we kind of set the trend in that. We as models and talent and businesses, we set the trend on like what's going on. So I think that negotiating payment for yourself really kind of helps establish kind of like guidelines for like how businesses should interact with you as a model, but also like models as a whole or talent as a whole. So I think that that's like a really good thing to think about in this podcast as we go through all these tips. Realize that these tips and these things don't necessarily just affect you as an experienced model, but they also affect like the businesses, and they affect other models and help create new opportunities and kind of create new mindsets moving forward. Does that make sense, Miranda, what I just said?
Yeah, 100%. Because I think it's all about what you said, kind of like setting the precedent. You don't, and I know we're going to get more into this later, but you don't really want to set the precedent that you are working for free necessarily, like when you are bringing time and expertise in. Because then, like Chris said, it kind of makes it more difficult for like other businesses and other models and people who want to pay, or get paid and like actually make a career out of this, because you don't just want to be dealing in like all the time free work. It's kind of like you wouldn't expect a photographer necessarily, like if you were doing family photos, right? You wouldn't expect them to just do that for free because it's fun. It's like, no, that's their job. And so as a model, when it's your job, yeah, it's good to set that precedent of like, I plan to negotiate payment. Here's the skill set I'm bringing to the table, and just setting that precedent at the beginning that, yeah, 100% makes sense. And that's so, so important.
Yeah, and that is a good point too. And you said that about like the family photos. Like I hear it all the time as somebody who connects with other businesses, connects with other models, connects with other photographers. I hear people say all the time, well, models, they love to do it. It's something they love to do and they're doing it for fun. So I'm sure every model in here has heard this. I'm sure other talent, I'm sure actors have heard this.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that like it's a really bad like train of thought that people have where it's like, oh, they enjoy doing it. And a lot of different kinds of like art related careers also experience this, right? Where it's like, oh, you do it for fun. So, your reward is doing it. So we kind of want to help like also remove that thought process of, well, it's fun. Well, we should enjoy what we're doing. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, you shouldn't be doing it, right? And so photographers love taking photos, but they still get paid for it. Graphic designers love doing graphic design, but they should still be getting paid for it, right? Attorneys love doing law, but they should still be getting paid for it. So I think the same concept also applies to models. So I think negotiating payment is way beyond just the simple idea of saying like, hey, here's I wanted $100 for doing this photo shoot, right? It's setting a precedent for how people should treat you as a model and a professional, but also like other professionals in the same field. So we talked about, what is payment. We talked about a little bit just about, why negotiating is important. But I think the important thing to think about with negotiation, and this is something they teach you in business. So I don't know if they teach models this or if y'all read about this at all, but it's a lot easier to start negotiating now than it is later, right? And so if you think about it in the concept of, if you do a lot of shoots, like say you have 5 favorite photographers and you do a lot of shoots with them, and historically you've just gone and done the shoot, you didn't ask for anything in return. Sometimes they maybe send you a set of photos that you can use in your portfolio, right? So we associate that with time for print. However, if you do that on repeat over and over and over and over and over and over again with these photographers and new photographers who reach out, it's going to be a lot harder for you to just out of nowhere say, oh, I want you to pay me for this next one, right? Because they're going to feel disappointed because they've been getting a free service from you, and they're going to feel as if you're trying to maybe take advantage of them. But you're also feeling in a position where you feel like you've been taken advantage of for a while. So it's a lot easier for you to have like the tools for success and be thinking about negotiating payment up front versus later when, it may be a little too late to negotiate payment with certain partners, right? And that
Sorry, I was just going to say, yeah, because I feel like how many times, like, have people felt like, I'm sure we've all experienced this, like, you have an awkward conversation that could have been avoided had you just set that expectation the first time around. Like, you're going to avoid so many awkward conversations if you just come in and say, these are my expectations, first thing, point blank periods. And I just had to throw that in there because that's so relatable, I think, in every area of life, and especially, like, with this.
Oh, you're 100% right. And I've seen it so many times where, I've had models come to me and tell me, well, I'm afraid to even ask them for payment because I've done it for free for so long. Right. And so like it's really important to have like a mindset of negotiation payment up front. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you always ask for money up front, right? If you're a new model, you may say, hey, I will work with you this time for print. And if you really like my services and you appreciate what I do, next time we'll negotiate a payment. Right. So you still have room to negotiate and say like, hey, this is the terms. right? But you really want to like decide as a model, like what you really want out of this in the long run, because and start implementing those strategies now, because it's going to be a whole lot harder to. You've been doing a lot of stuff for free. Hey, I want you to pay me for this. And so that's, where the tips, we'll have some tips for you here coming up for negotiation. But I think it's really important to like talk about that right up front, because a lot of people will go, okay, well, I'm going to do a few more shoots for free before I start talking about payment. And then before you realize you're down a rabbit hole you'll never be able to climb out of, because you've been doing stuff for free for so long, and a lot of artists, even like painters and designers and even photographers, walk into the same rabbit hole where they do stuff for free for family members and they do stuff for free for friends, and then they never can seem to get out of that hole where they can't charge enough, or they can't begin to charge people because they've just been doing it for free for so long. Mm-hmm. So keep these things in mind. Payment doesn't necessarily have to be money, but if you're expecting to eventually start charging people money for your time, you need to think about like how that impacts you and how it impacts the community, and then also how it impacts future negotiations for yourself, right? So some tips for negotiation. I think this is my favorite part, because most people, want to ask for money, but they don't necessarily have like great tips for that. So I'm going to give you some tips. My number one tip, and I'm not just saying this because I run SDS Modeling Co., but my number one tip is to always have a partner. It's always easier. It's always better to have somebody in your corner to speak on your behalf, speak about your skill sets, to brag about you, to showcase your awesomeness and all of those things. It's easier to have somebody do that on your behalf or with you than it is to do that yourself, right? You never really want to come off like braggadocious or, seem like super self-conceited or any of those things. So having a partner can also help, have somebody to showcase all your skills and all your work in a professional way, while also being able to help kind of make the negotiation side of it a little easier, because, your managers want to know have a little bit more experience understanding, time, how much time it takes to do a shoot, how much time it takes to, for makeup, or how much it costs to do this or costs to do that. So they're going to have a good, kind of like business like mindset on like how to help negotiate payment for you. So they're going to also think about things that you may not think about, like travel. They're going to think about gas. They're going to think about, okay, if it's an all day thing, is there food provided? So like negotiation is a lot easier when you have somebody who can do the negotiation. The easiest tip, have somebody help you with it or do it for you. Like that's tip numero one. My second tip is, it's always easier for you when you begin to like set your price points. It's always easier to go down in price than it is to go up in price. And so like, what does that mean? It means overprice yourself. Like whatever you think your worth is, you're worth more. Start charging that and start requesting that, because what will happen is people will always want to negotiate with you, right? So if you say it's going to be $500 for the day, they may say, well, I could do $250. Like we would love for people to just give us what we want, right? We would love to say, hey, I could do it for $250, but people are going to want to like save their own money. They're going to want to save their own time. So they're going to want to negotiate with you. And so if you overprice things, you always will have room to come down in your price. So it makes it feel like the client's getting a deal, right? They're getting a special because you went down in price, even though you overpriced with that expectation. So you're not really losing money. And then what happens is if somebody does pay full price, guess what? You got extra money, you got extra cash for your time, right? And so this is like a really like fundamental like business thing. Like pawn shops do it all the time. If you watched any like famous pawn shop show, they always go the highest number first and then they work down. Because what you can't do, and I have personally experienced this as a photographer, is tell somebody, oh, I'll do your photo session for $50. Next spring rolls around, they're ready for their next round of family photo sessions. Hey, it's $50, right? Well, actually, my prices have went up to $150. Like anybody watching this already just got a negative reaction just from hearing me say that. Well, it was 50 before. Why is it 150 now? So as a model, you're going to experience that same thing where if you tell somebody, I'm going to do a set for 50, well, next time they're going to, unless it's something like dramatically different, that's what they're going to expect. So it's going to be a lot easier for you. Set the bar way up here, and then you can come down and meet people in the middle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Because like I liked your first analogy. Like if you say 500, maybe they'll counter 250 or 300. Well, if you'd said 250, they'll counter 100. So like exactly right, because it's like people are willing to pay a certain amount, and if you put that number in their head that's higher, it's exactly what Chris said. They're gonna think they're getting like a deal. If it like, you know what I mean? If it goes a little lower, so like if you want 250, yeah, say like 500 maybe, and then like you said, maybe you'll get 500. And don't underestimate your worth. I think that was a really good point. It's like I think sometimes it feels awkward to like put a value on our own time and money things, but like Chris said, if you have a partner, especially in a manager who can back you up and say like, no, this person is worth that, like I have links to their portfolio, like I can vouch for them, then like yeah, you just got to put your worth out there, and a manager or a partner can help you do that. So it's kind of those two tips in one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And knowing your worth is a really big one. And a tip regarding that too, and if you don't know how to like set your pricing, one really easy way to do it is just set a per hour rate. So like if you're doing this, like how much would you as a photographer want to pay you to do it? That would be one way to look at it. Or how much do you think you're worth per hour? And then just set your per hour rate, right? So if you're an amateur, you may think that you're worth a little bit more than minimum wage, so you may set yourself a $13 an hour rate. Or if you're a professional and you've been doing this for 10 years and you know all the in and outs and you know everything, you may say, I'm worth $250 an hour. Or you may just say, hey, I want to make $20 an hour doing this, and I'd be okay with that. Right. So it's easier to set an hourly rate. And then what that will allow you to do is never like, I have a hard time telling people to book per event because every event is a little different. So don't just say like my flat rate is $100. Mm-hmm. Like that's a bad way to go about it because people are going to find a lot of ways to get a lot out of you for that $100. So what you say is my hourly rate is this, or you can book me for X amount of hours for this. And then you can kind of give them a discount, right? So what that will allow you to do then is when you a photographer or a business or a brand reaches out and they say, hey, we want to use you for this project, you can say, well, how many hours do you expect for this to take? They may say 2. Well, if you booked yourself at $50 an hour, you can tell them, well, it's going to be $100 for the set because I value my time at $50 an hour. Now, you don't have to tell them that's what you value your time at, but that's one really tip. Figure out what your self-worth is, what you realistically would expect yourself to make per hour. And, everybody wants to say they're worth $100 an hour. There's not a lot of people worth $100 an hour. I'm not worth $100 an hour. You know what I mean? And I run the business. And so I think that we have to like realistically look at our own self-worth too. Don't be overly conceited and think that you're worth more than what you actually are, because you're going to put people off. And so while we say like set the bar high, overprice yourself, but don't necessarily always think that you're worth more than what you are worth, because there's always somebody who will do it. They'll do it for less, and they may even do a better job than you for doing it. Mm-hmm. So there's always somebody else on the grind. So just, know your own self-worth, but also like my next tip is stick to your guns. So like know your self-worth, know what your rate is, know what you want for your time, and stick to your guns. Like do not, like if you want to get paid for this shoot, that's it, get paid for the shoot, or don't do the shoot. And I've had people like try to negotiate, but then they end up doing it for free because they're scared they won't get the shoot. It happens. We all lose opportunities. And my advice would be don't get discouraged over that opportunity. Like if they really are reaching out to you because they want you as a model and they really think that you are the person for this project, right? And they're not willing to at least like hear you out on what your negotiations are, then you have to ask yourself as a model, is this a person that I'm willing to work with? Now, not everybody's going to be able to afford you, and that's not a bad thing, right? That doesn't mean that they don't think you're worth it, right? But if they're really like a trustable partner, they'll ask like, how can we make payments on this? Or maybe they'll say, hey, I don't have the payment up front, but I really value like what you're worth. You know what I mean? Like I really want this out of the shoot.
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best to get what they feel they're worth. But I also, negotiate with every person I work with, whether it's another business, whether it's another model, every single person I work with, I negotiate with, and I say, hey, here's what I can offer you. And so you have, as a model, kind of have to do that, but then stick to your guns. Don't back down, because the next time you ask for payment, they're just going to be like, oh, she'll just do it for free anyways. And nobody really takes you serious if you back down.
Exactly. Stick up for yourself. And then too, like, I think all these things just keep reinforcing like having a partner being important as well, because like, yeah, like stick up for yourself, have someone that will stick up for you. And yeah, don't be afraid to walk. Like Chris said, like there's always going to be other opportunities. I mean, sometimes things aren't going to work out. Maybe some people can't afford you, but like Chris said, if they're trustworthy, they might say, well, hey, let's try to make this work, but just never just say, okay, well, I'll just do it because like FOMO and I don't want to miss out. Like, because yeah, I mean, that sucks sometimes when you have to walk or you have to miss something. But if you're a bookable model and people want you, like there are going to be more opportunities. And like Chris said, you don't want to set the precedent that you work for free because it's your time, your expertise. Like you deserve to get paid for your work. So yeah, like sometimes it's okay to just say, well, if you're not going to pay me, that's fine. I'll just, never mind.
Yeah. And a lot of people they're going to respect that ultimately, right? They're going to respect you as a model when you say like, all right, well, I only do this kind of project for this kind of thing. And it is okay to like say, I'll accept time for print for this kind of project versus this kind of project, right? It's knowing like, again, it goes knowing what you're worth, knowing your own experience. Like if you've never done a swimwear shoot, and I'm just using this as an example, if you've never done a swimwear shoot, and maybe you're not the most confident in doing this kind of shoot because you've never done it, you don't know what to expect, you don't know like what kind of poses to do yet because it's your first one, right? You may not want to say, hey, I'm going to do this shoot for $200. You may say, I want to do this time for print, and then if you need me again, hey, maybe we'll look at doing this shoot for X amount, right? So again, it goes back to negotiation, knowing your own value, your own worth, but also your own experience, right? So then, which also leads me into like another kind of tip, but it's also like a separate point in itself in negotiating payment. And that's, as models, like you all have projects that you want to do. Like there are things that you're like, yeah, I'm not going to turn this down, even if they make me pay to do it, right? Like there's those like those assignments that you're like, I want to do this because this is awesome, which is fine. Like that's exciting. We're all excited to get to do those projects. But then there's projects where photographers reach out to you and you're like, this is boring. Like I don't want to do this. It's either below me, it's not in a field I'm interested in. Like, say if you're like really well known like swimwear, or you're really well known for modeling prom dresses, or say you model solely with cars. Like no matter what the genre is, you can plug it in here. And so somebody reaches out, hey, we want to use you for this specific project. Well, if you're not used to that kind of project, or say it's like kind of below you, or it's kind of boring to you, negotiating a payment may make it worth it to you to do, right? So like I can't tell you how many times I've like told models about projects and they're like, I don't really want to do that. That sounds boring. Well, me as a photographer, I'm like, oh, well, okay. I feel kind of defeated, but at the same time, like they could also maybe have negotiated payment.
I have a good anecdote about this from acting too. So I think in acting, I have a lot of friends and like myself too, who like we jump on those passion projects, and I do like short films I'm really passionate about, and I don't always take payment, but like if I get asked to just be like person two in a commercial for like a restaurant or something, and I know it's going to be boring and just kind of like I'm sitting there all day, but I'm going to make $2,500 for like a weekend of shooting, like I'm going to do it, right? Like because I'm like, dude, that's money, right? Like I don't care how boring this is, like I'm going to get paid. And I know so many actors who work that way. Like you can't always be working on Shakespeare, or like Marvel movies. Like, you can't always be doing like the most amazing, awesome, passionate thing. And so even if something is like boring, like Chris said, like, hey, it's a check sometimes, right? Like, you
Yeah.
know.
And so like sometimes work is work. Somebody told me that one time when I accepted a really boring project designing a really boring flyer one time back in my youth. And somebody told me, it was like, sometimes work is work. And that always stuck with me, and it's the same thing with modeling, and so you may have a photographer reach out, they're brand new, their work isn't very good, but they're really passionate about it and they want to increase their portfolio, and they reach out and say, hey, I'm trying to build my portfolio, will you do a shoot? And your initial reaction is like, their work isn't good, they're kind of boring, I don't really want to like help somebody else learn. But you could also say, well, would I do this for $100? And you might find that your tone about the project may change a little bit. And then that's one of those situations where you can say, yeah, my time for this kind of project would be X amount of dollars. If you're really interested in building your portfolio and doing all these things you're talking about, I'm a great person to work with, and I can really help you, but it's going to, cost you this amount of money. And then that's where you stick to your guns and you just walk away from the project if, no harm, no foul.
Amen and amen. They can't see me, but I'm just over here nodding my head like this the whole time. Exactly.
Yeah. So, that negotiating payment is just it's so far more important, I think, than just saying like, hey, I want money, right? Because it builds expectation for yourself. It builds the expectation for the business or the photographer or the whoever's, right? It builds expectations for other models to also say, hey, maybe I should be charging, right? You can inspire other people. And also it builds your own self-confidence, right? It feels good to get paid. And so I think it does a lot of worth, and it's something really important to like really think about. And again, going back to tip number one, just having a partner can help you with all of those things in so many different ways, whether it's bragging about you, whether it's showing your portfolio, whether it's handling the negotiation, whether it's handling the booking, all of those things. Like, it's so important to just have somebody in your side. But if you're a lone wolf and you want to do it all by yourself, more power to you. But stick to your guns, I think, is like probably the second most important tip.
Totally. And I think too, when you have a partner, I like to think of it this way, like when you have a manager and a partner, like an agent or an agency, like then you get to focus on the modeling. Sometimes it's hard to play agent and model. Like, when you need to focus on the modeling, that's another great thing about having an agent or a manager is like they can deal, with that stuff. And then you can focus your energy on like the job you are coming to do. You don't have to feel like you're doing both. So that's another benefit in my personal experience to having like an agent or a manager on your side as well.
Yeah, and that's really important. And a lot of people think of like an agent in today's term is like kind of like a website where like people can go to book you, or like they're the ones always finding you the job. That may not always be the case. Like, they work really hard in trying to find and build new opportunities, partnerships. But your agent, like if they're really like they're set and helping you, right, and like being there for you, you can also say like, hey, I have a photographer reach out, and you can send people to. Do you have one of your cards with you, like right next to you, or are they?
No, I don't have one right next to me. Actually,
Okay.
they're in the office actually with Andrew, my husband, who
Oh.
I've never met. But yeah, my husband, the guy that lives with me.
Well, I was just say, like we made cards even for Miranda where it's like, it has my info. So like when she hands it to somebody, she in the back of her mind doesn't have to worry about like the negotiation part, right? Because she knows that if somebody calls me, I'm gonna be like, Miranda's worth this money, you crazy person. You better pay her, right? And so then I bully them into paying her. So no, I don't bully anybody, but she also knows that like then she can like as a model, right? She can then just like I can say, hey, somebody reached out about this project, or hey, I saw this project. Are you interested in this? And then it's a simple yes or no. How much do you think your time would be worth? Yes or no. And then if she says yes, and then if she gets the project, she can just show up and do her thing. And then the people are like, wow, she's actually worth the money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And having an agent too can also like give an appearance that maybe like you are in an elevated status, maybe even, right? Because you have an agent, you have somebody negotiating on your behalf. It makes you appear also more professional.
Mm-hmm.
Because the professional is like handling the negotiation for you.
Exactly. And I think too, like, then, yeah, that's a great point. Just I think it looks more professional because then you're not just handling it through like your personal, maybe like Instagram or something, or like your personal phone number, like having like a professional like intermediary there like is really important because yeah, one, it looks legit, but like if you're demanding payment and this is like your job, your career, then like that's essential, you know, to keep it professional, keep it like career focused, and then having that like buffer with like a business or an agent that like works in the modeling business. That's yeah, I mean that just looks more legit, right? Than me being like, you should pay me. Here's my Venmo, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that actually, like you saying that sparks like another like point about this in my mind. And part of negotiating payment is also like, and I should have thought about this at the beginning, but it's also collecting payment, right? So if somebody says like I'm going to pay you X amount of money, you still have to collect that money from them. And that's also like a situation that can be very stressful, very sketchy. It's not always, right? Sometimes people are like really professional and they're like, here's the money, here you go, have a nice day. Sometimes people are difficult about things. Do you want to be chasing down loose ends all the time, right? Having a partner, somebody who can just pick up the phone and say, hey, like we need this payment, can also like help you feel more relaxed knowing that they help negotiate payment, but you know they're also going to ensure like they're going to get payment or else.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like you don't want to be as a model, like also come off as somebody who's like really mean and disrespectful to people, like you need to pay me right now, and all of these things, and then it hurts your like self confidence, and then also like may deter you from like wanting to do more projects in the future if you feel like you got burnt on payment.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, well, I think I'm all out of tips. Miranda did all the talking on the last episode. I did a lot of the tips this episode. So I think that's it. Unless you have other points you want to interject, I think we can, call this. We're going to wrap this season up. We talked about a lot of interesting things. We talked about body positivity. We talked about skincare. We talked about marketing yourself as a model. We talked about red flags. We talked about lots of really great stuff. We've got lots of great quotes. One of my favorite quotes from this season was you glow differently when you show up with confidence. And it was something that Miranda said in talking about body confidence. And it just really has stuck with me. So if you haven't seen these episodes, go back and watch them like fully. I'm sure some of you have seen like 1 or 2 seconds here or there. Go back and watch these episodes because there's a lot of great content, a lot of great advice. So anything you want to say to the people before you see them again in the spring?
Yeah, I actually would like to say that if you all think of anything for season 3, when we come back in the spring, refreshed with a new season, and it's not snowing all the time finally anymore, if there's anything that you all would like to see, just, when we bring in a new season, what have we not talked about yet that maybe you're interested in? Or what did we talk about a little bit and you think, like hit that again, go deeper with this, So just whatever you all want to hear, whatever you all need help with, that's what we're here for. That's what we make this content for. We make it for you guys. So yeah, let us know.
All right, you heard it. Let us know what you want us to talk about. I don't want to come up with all the topics all the time. That's boring. So as always, you can find us. You can find this specific lights, camera, and action on just about everything that you can think of. It's on YouTube. It's on Instagram TV. Well, I don't even know if they call it IGTV anymore. I think they just call it videos now. But it's on Instagram. We post segments of it on TikTok and Instagram Reels. We're on Spotify and we're on Apple Podcasts. So anywhere that you want to hear it, whether you just want to hear the audio because you don't want like looking at me, or whether it's because you want to see Miranda, you can watch it on YouTube. Make sure you check us out. You can find SDS Modeling Co. on every platform, just SDS Modeling Co. Just like that. Search it. You'll always find us. You can find Miranda at
Fur Panda, at FIRPANDA, because like I always say, nothing else rhymes with Miranda. So that's at Fur Panda. You can also find me on my website. That's mirandamuses.com. And then, of course, on SDS Modeling Co. You can learn more about me on the website, Instagram, and everything through SDS channels as well.
And if you're ever confused on where to find Miranda, we consistently tag her content on blog posts. We consistently tag her on our page, and we always share content to our stories. So just check out the page. You'll find her there. I'm 100% sure of it. So again, SDS Modeling Co. Fur Panda, because nothing else runs with Miranda. Miranda Muses, STSModelingCo.com. Until next time, everybody, we had fun, and we'll see you again in the spring.